Scientists fed over 10,000 images into a neural network trained to detect and categorize every type of man-made design. But when they slipped in a pattern pulled straight from a farmer's field, something unexpected happened. The system flagged it, froze, then labeled it as an anomaly beyond human logic. This wasn't random. It wasn't art. And it definitely wasn't from Earth. It began as an ordinary research project, or at least that's what the team at the European Neural Pattern Recognition Lab thought. The goal was straightforward: train a generative AI system to categorize global symbols, architectural motifs, mathematical fractals, and ancient artistic patterns. The team had fed it everything from Mayan glyphs to Tibetan mandalas, blueprints of Gothic cathedrals to NASA orbital telemetry. The AI performed beautifully. Until they added crop circles. Not just any crop circles. The dataset was curated to include those formations previously labeled as high-complexity, low-explanation anomalies. These were the ones that had puzzled experts in geometry, physics, and even military intelligence. Still, no one expected much. Most scientists involved considered crop circles a quirky side topic, something to indulge during lunch breaks or late-night brainstorming sessions. But the moment the images entered the neural net, something changed. The system didn't just struggle. It stalled. It flagged several patterns with what it called algorithmic entropy spikes, a kind of digital distress signal indicating that the data was structured, yet not categorizable. These formations had symmetry, order, repetition, even mathematical layering. But they didn't match any known dataset. The AI couldn't label them as human art. It couldn't file them under natural geometry. It didn't even try to guess. It simply returned a status no one on the team had seen before: not classifiable. The AI had been designed to function like a filter. You put something in, and it tells you what it is, or at least, what it's most similar to. But in this case, there were no suggestions, no second-best guesses. The system simply lit up with warning colors. Something about the symmetry and nested complexity in one specific crop circle formation caused it to generate what looked like a map of interference patterns. Normally, this happened when the system tried to interpret encrypted data or unreadable formats. But this wasn't code. It was a shape pressed into a field. Dr. Elena Kravtsov, the lead data analyst, was the first to realize the gravity of the situation. She ran a secondary compression test on the image, expecting the file size to drop significantly as the system reduced the pattern into simpler data. Instead, it did the opposite. The file expanded. The system was detecting a level of embedded complexity that surpassed that of ancient ciphers and even some types of DNA sequence encoding. That's when the word message started getting tossed around, not metaphorically, but literally. Researchers were now staring at a formation that resisted compression, mimicked intelligent design, and triggered the same AI flags used to detect forged currency, deepfake data, or malicious encryption. This wasn't about pretty swirls in wheat anymore. Something or someone had left a fingerprint in a field that artificial intelligence now recognized as intentional. And not just intentional. Purposeful. But the mystery didn't stop at the pixels. When scientists visited the original site of the formation that stumped the AI, they found something even more baffling. The wheat wasn't just flattened. The stalks were bent at precise 90-degree angles, still alive, unbroken, and woven over one another in a pattern more complex than anything a team of humans could replicate in a single night. There were no vehicle tracks. No broken stems from careless footfalls. No equipment drag marks. It was as if the design had been pressed into existence by a force that moved without touching. That's when they noticed the soil. Beneath the pattern, samples showed subtle crystallization of minerals, microscopic traces of metallic spheres, and mild magnetic alignment changes. These were not the byproducts of pranksters with boards and string. These were the kinds of shifts you might expect after exposure to high-frequency electromagnetic radiation. But no sources of such energy were found in the area. No power lines, no cell towers, and no radiation spikes in the surrounding environment. Only the formation bore the evidence, perfectly centered and sharply defined. Faced with mounting physical and digital data that pointed in one direction, intelligence without origin, the team decided to press further. If one formation could trip an ARIS alarm systems, what would happen if they ran the entire archive of crop circle formations through the network? And that's where the real chaos began. Could the rest of these so-called field patterns hide something even deeper, an encrypted language that's been sitting in plain sight all along? Once the researchers began feeding in the full library of crop formations, the results only became stranger. Over 200 high-resolution aerial photographs, collected across multiple decades and continents, were loaded into the system. The AI began processing them, each pattern analyzed for geometry, compression characteristics, symmetry balance, and entropy scoring. It worked in silence at first, sifting through what it assumed were basic organic shapes. Then the alert started flashing again. The neural network was built to detect intentionality in design. When it flagged known mathematical forms like Fibonacci spirals or Penrose tilings, it marked them as highly ordered and human-made. But when it hit the most intricate crop formations, something unusual happened. These designs did not register as human. Nor did they register as random. They existed in a third category, an unknown classification that fell into the narrowest band of algorithmic order ever measured by the system. They were not just complex. They were efficient, elegant, and precise to a degree that made most ancient architecture look like finger painting. Researchers had expected the AI to either dismiss the formations as artistic flourishes or maybe even label them as errors. Instead, it began to highlight specific patterns and elements that appeared again and again across multiple years and locations. These recurring elements were not identical, but they were similar in a way that suggested a unifying blueprint. The same arc ratios. The same mirrored segments. The same radial layouts balanced with almost supernatural accuracy. This was not the kind of variation found in human pranks or even in natural chaos. The AI was recognizing what it called recurring structural fingerprints, elements that appeared with such frequency and consistency that they could not be explained by coincidence. In one case, the system flagged a pattern that appeared 12 years apart in two different countries, each with the same internal geometry but rotated exactly 180 degrees. That level of recurrence raised a difficult question. If no known group was responsible, and if the geometry surpassed human capability within the constraints of time and location, then where did these patterns come from? The AI had no answer, but it began offering something close. It proposed that the formations were part of a larger information set. Not individual messages. Not random designs. But nodes in a distributed signal system, each one reinforcing the structure of the next. The idea was unnerving. What if these crop formations were not isolated events but pieces of a much larger communication protocol? Like fragments of a puzzle, their full meaning might only emerge when the entire set was seen together. That theory changed the way the team viewed the project. No longer were they just cataloging shapes in wheat. They were mapping a language made of geometry and form, one that had been seeded into our world over time. To test this idea, they arranged the flag patterns side by side in chronological order. What they saw astonished them. The design seemed to evolve. Early patterns were simple, concentric circles, basic lines, mirrored pairs. Later ones showed increasing complexity, integrating mathematical constants, fractals, and astronomical alignments. It was as if the formations had matured, their language growing more intricate as human technology improved. The system highlighted this evolutionary arc, suggesting that the creators of these designs were adapting their message in step with our progress. This raised a new and more unsettling possibility. Were these formations waiting for us to catch up? Were they calibrated not just to our fields but to our minds, slowly escalating in complexity as if to test our growing capacity for recognition? The ARI's latest discovery supported that theory. It isolated a specific cluster of formations from the past 5 years and compared them to brain-scan responses from a visual cognition study. The overlap was shocking. The patterns that had confounded the AI the most were also the ones that triggered the deepest neural responses in human test subjects. That finding sparked a hypothesis even more bizarre than anything the researchers had considered. What if these patterns were not just meant to be seen? What if they were designed to be felt? to bypass logic, engage emotion, and activate deeper structures of thought than language can reach. The AI suggested the concept of neurosymbolic messaging, information encoded not just in visible design but in its effect on human consciousness. It was a hypothesis no one wanted to believe. But the data didn't lie. The patterns that stumped the machine were also the ones that woke something up in the human brain. Now the team had to ask a question they had avoided from the beginning. If these designs are a language, then who exactly is speaking to us?